the previous Soul Eater novel video I covered chapter 2, which covered from Tio's departure up to the group meeting Futch before travelling to Magician's Island. Chapter 2 greatly expanded on Tio's departure scene, and the group meeting Kraze to receive their first mission played out differently than it did in the game. In this video I'll be covering chapter 3. Chapter 3 covers the events of Magician's Island from when the group arrive until they return to Kraze with the Astral Predications. In this chapter, the group's encounter with Luc is very different from the game, and their meeting with Kraze upon their return is also different from the game. There's also a small new scene involving Luc and Leknaat at the end. As I mentioned in the previous video, I'll be doing in-depth coverings of the brand new scenes, as well as scenes that heavily differ from how they played out in the game, but scenes that are too similar or identical to the game I'll skim over with a quick summary. And as always, I'll be doing no editing on these videos covering the novels, so treat them as an audio experience. If a picture appears in the book, I'll put it up on screen while talking about that scene, but aside from that, it's strictly going to be audio with the cover of the novel. Chapter 3: Magician's Tower. Tir and the others reached Magician's Island on the mouth of the Leknaat Canal just as the sun entered the southern sky. After circling above the island several times, Black landed in a rocky area a little ways away from Magician's Tower, which stood in the center of the island. Futch told the group that they'd arrived. He said he hopes they weren't flying too fast and asked them if any of them passed out. Stuttering and pausing as he spoke, Tir responded, "Not at all." Despite his claim, Tir had the strangest sensation that his body was floating even though his feet were on solid ground. Because Futch was accustomed to riding dragons, he walked normally over in front of Black as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Black nuzzled up to him and Futch stroked his head while the 5 passengers staggered down. Futch said he'll wait here until their work is done and told them to be careful. Still stuttering and pausing as he spoke, Tir thanked Futch and told him he'll see him later. To get to the tower, Tir and his party entered the forest on shaky legs, walking like sailors on land. They moved forward while making sure the tower where Leknaat was said to reside was visible in between the trees. Just when Tir stopped feeling like he was floating, there was an opening in the forest and an austere tower that looked like it belonged to an ancient civilization appeared in front of them. The tower was formed by countless megalithic structures. The stones were crumbling in places, weathered by the passage of time. The outer walls were the colour of grey ash, but they were splashed with green by the moss and climbing vines growing here and there. The stones were so tall it seemed a mystery how they had ever been drug up there in the first place, and the top of the tower seemed to extend even above the clouds. Relieved they had found the tower, Ted commented that it was a surprisingly easy mission. Tir replied and said they should get the Astral Predications quickly as he walked up to the steps leading to the entrance of the tower. A voice then rang out from the dark depths of the entrance saying that he's been waiting for them. Grabbing their weapons, the group then peered into the entrance. A young boy then appeared in the entrance of the tower with a glow of light and asked them what in the world they're drawing their weapons for. Smirking at the group, the boy told them they're a hopeless lot and that he and Leknaat aren't the only ones who live here. Tir lowered his staff and asked the boy who he is. The boy told them his name is Luc, he's Leknaat's apprentice. He then asked them if they were here for the Astral Predications. Tir said that's right and asked him if Lady Leknaat is here. Luc didn't answer Tir's question. He stared into Tir's eyes and while smiling, he nodded 3 times as he said he sees what she meant now. Tir asked what who meant. Luc said it's nothing and told Tir to follow him. Luc then turned around and entered the tower. Once inside, Luc turned to the group who were standing below him on the staircase and told them that Lady Leknaat is in the first room at the top of the tower and that he'd go ahead. Tir called out to him to wait, but Luc became wrapped in a blue light and flashes of light shot out of his body. Tir shut his eyes and heard Cleo call out, "What the?" The flashing ceased, and when Tir opened his eyes, Luc was gone. With admiration in her voice, Cleo asked if that was wind magic and commented that teleportation magic is high-level magic. Gremio nodded and replied he'd never seen such magic before, but he'd expect no less from a disciple of Leknaat. The group excitedly talked about their first experience seeing high-level magic, but the conversation dried up as they climbed the tower. Leknaat was all the way at the top of the tower, and the staircase wound on for so long that even the self-proclaimed inexhaustible pawn gave in and complained that they're still not at the top floor. They continued making their way up the tower and knew they'd finally arrived at the top floor when they found Luc looking down at them with a cold smile and telling them that they're late. Luc then told them that he'd go ahead and inform Lady Leknaat that they'd arrived as he turned to enter the room at the top of the tower. Everyone sat on the floor for a moment to catch their breath until Ted finally caught up. He then complained and asked who said this was an easy mission as he collapsed face first to the floor in exhaustion. Gremio helped him up and reminded him that he was the one who said this was an easy mission. Tir said to Ted, just one more push and we'll have the Astral Predications. Seeing Ted put his hands on his knees to stand up, Tir then pushed open the door and entered the room where Leknaat was waiting. This next part plays out almost the exact same as the game. Tir meets with Leknaat, she calls him cute and apologizes, she asks him what his name is and tells him how she can read the stars. She tells him about destiny and fate, you know the scene. She then orders Luc to teleport them back, they meet up with Futch and he takes them back to Gregminster. By the time they arrive back in Gregminster, the sun had just sunk behind the Lower Mar mountain range. Ted began complaining that it took longer to get back than it did to get to Magician's Island in the first place and asked Futch if he was slacking. Futch called Ted a jerk and told him there was nothing he could do about such a strong headwind and remarked that he should have thrown Ted off when he had the chance. Listening to Ted and Futch bicker brought a smile back to Tir's face, but now a new fear gripped its icy hand around his heart. He had better get the Astral Predications to Kraze as soon as possible. Tir thanked Futch for his help and told him they're in his debt. A smile came back to Futch's face as he said he was just doing his job and he's glad nothing went wrong. Tir then asked him if he was heading back to the Dragon Knight's domain. Futch said he wants to look around Gregminster, but he's already running late, so he'll have to do it next time. Tir told him not to hesitate to call on him if he ever needs anything, as the two shook hands and said their farewells. Futch then climbed onto Black and the two took off into the sky. Tir then turned to the group and told them that they're almost done and they should go see Commander Kraze. Following his orders, everyone made their way into the castle. There were still retainers standing and moving about the castle interior, but the candles flickering here and there gave the place a lonely air that only made Tir feel even more uneasy. Tir muttered that they were late and wondered if they'd be okay as they entered the waiting room. Right on cue, Kraze's reedy voice came from out of his office, telling Tir that he was late and calling him a brat, asking him if he was waiting until he mummified. Tir bowed and offered his deepest apologies, but Kraze, sitting at his desk with his feet up, wasn't impressed. Tir timidly stepped forward and handed Kraze the document he had received from Leknaat. Kraze carelessly broke the seal and quickly skimmed the document. Kraze let out a humph as he confirmed the document he was handed was indeed Leknaat's Astral Predications and commented that Tir isn't completely useless after all. Tir let out a sigh of relief without realizing. The day was finally over, but Kraze commented, however. Tir looked up in confusion. Kraze told him that there's still a mountain of work to do and the Imperial Guard never sleeps. As he was about to assign them their next mission, Gremio cut in and said wait a minute. He told Kraze that they only just returned from the Magician's Tower and it's not reasonable to give them another assignment until they've had a chance to rest. Yeah, geez, both Pan and Ted muttered under their breaths. Gremio then added that they must first review and confirm the results of today's mission, and only after presenting their findings to the Emperor may they then be given their next assignment. Kraze let out a humph and had a worried look on his face. It seemed that Gremio, knowing exactly how cowardly Kraze is, had pushed him exactly where he wanted him. The room fell silent as they waited for Kraze's next words. After a moment of silence, Kraze finally spoke up. He told the group that it's a matter of urgency, that he doesn't mean they need to leave right away, but it's the Empire's wish that they set out in haste. Gremio couldn't refuse after Kraze stated it was the Empire's wish. Tir spoke up instead, saying he understands and asking what their next mission is. Kraze's expression changed as soon as he heard those words. His trademark disgusting smile crept back onto his face as he realized he had won out over Gremio. Kraze then let out another humph and once again called Tir a brat, saying he'll only say this once. He told them to the east of the capital is a little village called Rockland. Gremio audibly groaned upon hearing the name Rockland. Rockland was the nearest town to Gregminster, but it still took 3 days to get there by horse, and everyone felt exhausted just thinking about the trip. Kraze asked them what's the matter, and reminded them that they're working for the Empire now, so how about showing some smiles? He then told them that for some reason Rockland hasn't sent this year's tax payment. He already sent his aide Kanan to investigate, but he hasn't reported back, so they're to meet up with Kanan and the local governor to discover why the taxes haven't been paid. Kraze then told Tir that the governor's name is Grady, and not to forget that his aide Kanan is his superior, so he must obey Kanan's orders without question. Tir responded yes sir and left the room as soon as possible. Once they were outside the castle, he wanted to sigh, but Gremio beat him to it and sighed in defeat. Gremio apologized to Tir for not being able to help. Tir patted Gremio on the shoulder and told him not to worry about it. Cleo chimed in and told Gremio he did the best he could, and they don't have time to be miserable as they need to prepare for the trip. The group then returned to the McDohl mansion, their exhausted bodies weighed down even more by the task ahead of them. The story then cuts back to Leknaat and Luc in the Star Room of Magician's Tower. Leknaat told Luc that he did well, and Luc responded that he didn't do much as he crossed the room carrying a silver tray holding a tea set. He placed the tea set down on the table by the window, and while preparing the tea, he commented, "That by Tir, he's..." Leknaat murmured, "So you noticed too?" She then walked towards the window and pushed open the shutters. Outside the window, the stars glittered in the sky just as they had the night before. She then commented that the stars can be cruel for making a boy so young have to shoulder such a destiny. While pouring the tea, Luc asked her what will Tir do next. Leknaat told Luc that whatever Tir does next involves him too, and asked Luc to lend Tir his strength when he can. Finishing pouring the tea, Luc then turned to look at Leknaat curiously and asked her why, that Tir is just a boy who isn't even protected by a rune. Leknaat responded that she doesn't know. She read his future through astrology and felt she wanted to watch over and protect that future, but perhaps... Luc responded, perhaps what? Leknaat replied that it may be the gate rune dwelling in her body that's making her feel this way. Luc sighed as he asked, "Your rune, huh?" He then told her that her tea is ready. Leknaat turned to Luc with a small smile, then turned to face the red star shining in the western sky and murmured, "Tir McDohl, burdened with the Tenkai Star of Destiny, may you be guided down the right path." And that's the end of chapter 3. As you can see, or hear, this chapter contained quite a lot of differences from how these scenes played out in the game, and it even included a new small scene involving Luc and Leknaat. Just like the previous chapter, chapter 3 also does a great job of putting across what a disgusting slimeball Kraze is, and it makes you hate him that little bit more. In the next video I'll cover chapter 4, which focuses on Rockland and the Mount Seifu bandits. It plays out completely different from the game, and I think you guys will enjoy it. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.